Hello, I'm Chris Hamlett and I'm fascinated by surfaces. A surface of a material is very important because it determines what a material looks like, what it feels like, and also how it reacts with the world around it. Nature has developed very specific surfaces for very specific applications, and today we're going to have a look through an electron microscope at some examples of naturally occurring surfaces and how scientists have learned from this and created new materials. So you found a surface that you want to look at. How would you go about it? You could use a magnifying glass. This can give magnification up to about 70 times. Or you could use an optical microscope. This gives a magnification of up to about 1500 times. If you want to go at higher magnification, generally you have to use an electron microscope. So an electron microscope works by getting a surface, firing electrons at it, and then these electrons will either bounce off or hit the surface and eject other electrons, and then these get picked up by a detector, and then that is how the image is made. And electrons can be used to image much smaller features than light. And a scanning electron microscope, where your electron beam scans the surface, gives some magnifications up to about 100,000 times. But if you want even higher resolution, you have to have a very thin sample and actually fire electrons through it. And this is known as transmission electron microscopy. And this can actually resolve atoms and give magnifications up to about 1,000,000 times. So an example is this here from the literature, which is a transmission electron microscope image of a single strand of DNA, and in there you can see the atoms. So we can have a look through a scanning electron microscope at some surfaces that nature has developed for specific applications, and also at some surfaces developed by companies for commercial products. Some of these images were kindly taken for me by Ken and Romana at Zeiss, and also by Amy in the School of Metallurgy and Materials at the University of Birmingham. So the first surface we're going to look at is that of the wing of a Morpho butterfly. As you can see, this butterfly has got beautiful iridescent blue colour, and these are found in areas of South America. But the interesting thing is that this wonderful blue colour is not from any pigment in the wings at all. It's all down to surface structure. So let's have a look under the microscope at the wings of the Morpho butterfly. So if we have a look under the electron microscope at the butterfly's wings, we can see that it's made up of arrays of scales. And these scales are about 60 micrometers in width, which means 60 millionths of a metre, which is a bit thinner than that of a human hair. But what was also interesting on these scales, you can see there's these rib-like line structures. And if we zoom in even more, we can see that those ribs are actually piles of little ribs on top of each other. And these ribs are about 200 nanometers in width, where a nanometer is a billionth of a meter. So you can see how fine these structures are. But what gives the butterfly its colour is this stack of rib-like structures. So let's find out why.
So if we look at these stacked rib-like structures in cross-section, they look a bit like Christmas trees. So when light comes in, it bounces off the surface of these rib structures, and given that they're stacked, light reflects from different heights in the structure. This leads to light interfering with each other as it reflects. Some of this interference will be constructive, so the light will appear brighter, and some will be destructive, and that light will look fainter. And white light is not just one colour, it is a whole spectrum of colours. So if you think of a rainbow, you've got red light through to blue light, where red light has got the longest wavelength of light and blue light is the shortest wavelength. So when light hits the butterfly's wings, there's constructive interference of the blue light, making it appear a lot brighter, and you get this sort of wonderful iridescence.
So we saw there that these rib-like structures on the wings of the Morpho Butterfly result in interference of light, which in turn results in intense blue light reaching your eye. The wings and scales themselves are made out of a biopolymer called chitin, and scientists have used this interference type of approach to make iridescent blue fabrics, like in this dress here, that's made of a fabric called Morphotex, and this dress was designed by the Australian designer Donna Subro. And Lexus have developed a paint called Structural Blue, which uses small flakes in their paint, and these have been designed in such a way that we get iridescence through, again, interference of the light, resulting in intense blue light reaching your eye. So as you can see, we've learnt an awful lot from the butterfly. So our next surface is that of this. This is a lotus. It lives in slow moving rivers and deltas in India and other parts of South and Southeast Asia. And its leaf has got a very incredible property. So this is the size of one of the leaves, and if I take this fragment and get it closer to the camera, if we look at the leaf, you can see that water just rolls off really easily. So the lotus leaf has got a naturally occurring waxy surface, and so does holly. But with the holly, if we put the water on there, you see it starts pooling up, and it's not water repellent like the lotus leaf.
So why does water behave so differently on a holly leaf and a lotus leaf? Let's have a look under the microscope and find out.
So if we look through the microscope at the lotus leaf, we can see it's got a very bumpy surface. And if we zoom in on one of these bumps, you can see that these bumps are about 4 micrometers or 4 millionths of a meter in size. But zoom in even more and you can see on each of these bumps is another kind of structure, these sort of straw-like structures. And these are made of this naturally occurring wax. And so if we zoom out again, this bumpy surface, those bumps have got another layer of roughness on there, and this is known as a hierarchical roughness, which is the reason the lotus leaf repels water. But what about the holly? So with the holly, when we look at that under the electron microscope, we can see it's a lot flatter, more featureless than the lotus leaf, and it hasn't got this hierarchical structure. So even if we zoom in, it's fairly flat and featureless, apart from the occasional feature such as this sort of coffee bean structure, which is actually a stomata, which is part of the plant's respiratory system. So as we've seen, this hierarchical structure gives the lotus leaf the water repellent properties that the holly lacks. But why is that? So if we take this Duplo model here as a hierarchical structure, so you've got these bumps, and on these bumps there are bumps, and this balloon as the water droplet, and the rubber skin of the balloon represents the surface tension that you would find around a droplet. So this water droplet can sit on top of this hierarchical structure and easily roll around. So when any rain goes into the lotus leaf, it can just roll off due to this hierarchical structure, and also because the surface is coated in this natural wax. So as we know, waxes are what is known as hydrophobic or water hating. And coupled with the hierarchical structure, it then becomes super hydrophobic or incredibly water hating, often known as water repellent, which is why the lotus leaf has developed such a structure. And the reason it's developed this structure is because in its natural environment is generally in hot, dry locations. So the leaf can become very dusty. So as we see here, so it's got to make use of any rain that happens to occur. And when any water gets on a dusty lotus leaf, you can see it rolls off, the water droplet rolls off and picks up any dirt that's there, leaving a nice clean leaf. So it's not just plants and leaves that repel water, many animals and birds do too. So you can imagine if a duck swimming along the pond can't repel water with its feathers will get waterlogged and it will sink. So if we look at one of these feathers under the electron microscope, we can see that it's got a central rib there, and then off this rib comes little hairs off there, and off these hairs, again, there are sort of hairs giving the feathers a nice soft feel. So feathers, they're made of a biopolymer called keratin, which is the same stuff as in your hair. And when you sort of see a duck on a pond doing this and preening itself, it's actually spreading oil over the surface of its feather from a gland near its tail called the uropygial gland. So then you get the interplay between the rough surface of the feather and the hydrophobic oil that the duck is putting on its feather. So scientists have learnt from water repellent surfaces such as the duck feather and the lotus leaf, and actually there's an effect that's termed the Lotus Effect, which is this water repellent effect, and developed water repellent fabrics, paints and other coatings. So these water repellent swim shorts here, you can see the water skids off them.
So in a similar way to the lotus leaf and the duck feather, the fabric of these shorts has got a hierarchical structure too. So as you can see on these SEM images, the threads in the weave of the fabric are made up of individual fibres. So this provides that hierarchical structure, or roughness on roughness type structure. And the threads themselves are either coated or made out of a hydrophobic or water hating material. So that gives the rough water repellent surface to the shorts.
So the last surface we're going to look at is that of the gecko, more specifically the gecko's foot, and even more specifically that of the Tokai gecko's foot. The Tokai gecko is one of a number of species of gecko that can climb vertical surfaces and hang from ceilings. And it does this by its incredible microstructure on its feet. So if we look at its toes, we can see that it's got these line structures there, If we zoom in even more, these tiny microscopic hairs on there, and on the top of these, they split into more hairs. So these sort of hair-like structures are called setae, and what they do is that they result in an incredibly high surface area contact between the gecko's toe and a surface. So if we think of this Duplo model as a model of a surface, it'll have many of these tiny cracks in there. And these values in here are tiny, you can't see them by eye, but the hairs on the gecko's foot can actually go into these valleys and increase the surface contact between the gecko's foot, in this case my hand, and the surface, in this case the Duplo model. So the result of this greater contact increases what's called the van der Vaals force, or as you may think of it, the friction between the surfaces. So we can imagine this by taking these two books and putting one inside the other like that. If you've got it like this, they're fairly easy to pull apart. But if you interleave them with lots and lots of pages, like so, they become incredibly difficult to pull apart. You can see I'm going to have trouble reading these later. But this is because the surface contact between these two books is a lot greater, as there's more contact area than it was when I just interleaved 2 pages. So that is how a gecko can cling to vertical surfaces. And this is an artificial gecko pad. So with the gecko, the adhesion is all down to surface contact. There's no adhesive or glue there at all. And the same with this artificial pad. It's sort of a rubber pad, and it's been designed to sit on car dashboards so you can put your phone on there. But as we see here, it sticks to the backing plastic very easily, but also to vertical surfaces such as these shelves. You can see that's stuck pretty well. And there's been a lot of investigation into the development of these kind of surfaces. So for pads like that, or for sticky tape. So with sticky tape without any adhesive. So if we look at the surface of one of these pads, we can see that they're not quite as intricate as that of the gecko foot, but they're more just sort of thin rib-like structures, which take advantage of the fact that the rubber can form this sort of conformal contact, as it's known, or very close contact between surfaces. So it's not as intricate as a gecko's pad, but nature has had a lot longer to develop its surfaces than scientists have. So this is one of the reasons we take great inspiration from the natural world. Well, thank you very much for listening. I hope you've learnt something about the wonders of scanning electron microscopy and the fantastic surfaces in the world around us. And I'd encourage you to go and explore the surfaces around you, have a think about their purpose. For example, the Lotus Effect isn't confined just to the lotus leaf. Cabbages and peas often have got a very similar property too. I'd also like to thank Zeiss for taking some of those wonderful SEM images, as well as AB at the University of Birmingham. And I also hope you check out some of the other great stuff in our winter event and have great fun discovering materials. Thank you very much.